My CEO wife, Chloe, never would have dreamed that the property transfer documents her first love handed her were actually our divorce papers. I went to such great lengths for one reason. The Sterling family has an unbreakable rule. You can be widowed, but you can never divorce. So I struck a deal with her first love. If he could get Chloe's signature on the divorce papers, I would give him my position as her husband. Julian Vance made it look easy. The very next day, he smugly handed me the signed papers, raising an eyebrow with a smirk. Anything I give Chloe, she signs without a second glance. I stared at the flamboyant signature, Chloe Sterling, for a long moment before smiling softly and replying, "A pleasure doing business with you." When the mandatory 1-month waiting period for the divorce was over, I packed my bags immediately, rather looking forward to the look on her face when she found out the truth. In the meantime, I quietly continued to play the part of Chloe's gentle, understanding husband. This went on until the day of the annual Sterling family gala, when a couple of kids on skateboards knocked both Julian and me into the swimming pool. Without a moment's hesitation, Chloe swam straight for Julian, while I, terrified of the water, started to choke and passed out. I don't know how much time had passed when I opened my eyes again, but I found myself surrounded by a group of Sterling family elders, their eyes filled with concern and a strange joy as they gathered around Chloe and me. Seeing that I was awake, Chloe, who was sitting by my bedside, took my hand. For the first time ever, her expression held a hint of genuine tenderness for me. "Ethan," she said, "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a child of our own." That one sentence made my mind go completely blank. What did she just say? Pregnant? I slowly raised my hand to her stomach, feeling the faint presence of a new life within, and my heart twisted with complicated emotions. This child couldn't have come at a worse time. Noticing the lack of joy on my face, Chloe assumed I was still upset about the pool incident. "I know you're unhappy about what happened," she explained, "but for the sake of our child, you can understand, can't you?" I had no interest in hearing another word. My expression was placid as I slowly pulled my hand away. "I'm tired. You're pregnant. You should get some rest." Chloe didn't seem to notice my coldness. "I'm fine," she said, getting up. "You rest. I'm gonna go check on Julian." Later, when Julian heard the staff gossiping about Chloe's pregnancy, he gritted his teeth, a flicker of rage in his eyes. We had a deal that I would divorce Chloe and make a clean break. Now that she was pregnant, was I backing out of giving him his official spot as her husband? That's what he thought, and that's exactly what he came to ask me. Chloe had to leave for a while on company business, which gave Julian the opportunity to come into my room. I acted as if I hadn't heard him, calmly turning the pages of my book, an attitude that only infuriated him more. "Ethan Pierce, I'm talking to you," he snapped. I finally closed the book and met his gaze. "When?" I asked coolly. "Did I ever say I was backing out of our deal?" Surprise was written all over Julian's face. He'd always assumed I wasn't serious about the divorce, and now that Chloe was supposedly carrying my child, my position as her husband should have been more secure than ever. He would have found it perfectly normal for me to call the whole thing off, but he never expected me to be this determined. Late one night, an exhausted Chloe returned home. Just as she was about to open my bedroom door, her phone rang. She answered it, and a frantic voice came from the other end. "My ex-wife is here." The call was abruptly disconnected before he could say more. Forgetting all about me, Chloe grabbed the estate's security team and rushed out. The moment she was gone, I put on my coat and slipped out of the house, completely unnoticed. When Chloe arrived at Julian's apartment, the street was empty. She burst inside and immediately saw him huddled in a corner. The second he saw her, he threw himself into her arms as if he'd just survived a catastrophe. "Chloe, you're finally here." Chloe gently patted his back, her voice incredibly soft. "It's okay, she's gone now." Julian clung to her, his voice heavy with what seemed like sorrow. It took a long time for Chloe's comforting words to finally calm him down. He glanced at his watch. It was already the middle of the night. For some reason, the thought of me being home alone made her feel a strange sense of unease. After she got Julian settled in bed, she said patiently, "Get some rest. I should go back and check on Ethan." But Julian grabbed her hand. "Chloe, can't you just stay with me for tonight?" Chloe hesitated at first, but he was so persistent that she eventually gave in. She sent her security detail home and agreed to stay with him. My phone rang while I was on the operating table. I stared up at the shadowless lamp above me as I answered the call. "It was Julian's ex-wife," she said softly. "That crazy woman came to harass him again. I need to stay with him for a few days to make sure he's safe. I'll be back soon." I replied calmly in my usual unbothered tone. "There's no rush. You take good care of Mr. Vance." Chloe seemed taken aback and was about to say more, but I had already hung up. A week later, once she was certain Julian was safe, Chloe finally drove back to the Sterling estate. She got out of her car to find me on the porch, covered with a blanket and dozing in a rocking chair in the sun. She walked over and handed me a small box. "I know I've neglected you lately," she said gently. "This is a little something for you." I took the box, my eyes downcast. The gift from Chloe was the free promotional item that came with the main purchase. Julian had sent me a picture of the actual gift, a luxury watch, just yesterday to gloat, but I didn't say a word. I just accepted it quietly and set the box aside. My placid reaction seemed to unnerve her. She could tell something was wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The vague, unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Instead of leaving, she sat down in the chair next to me. "Next weekend is our 5th anniversary," she said. "Let's finally have a proper wedding ceremony." I looked at her. She was talking about our wedding, supposedly to make up for her recent neglect, yet her eyes were as dispassionate as ever, as if she were discussing a business transaction. In the past, a bitter feeling would have instantly flooded my heart, a thick, dark cloud of resentment I couldn't escape. But now, my heart was like a placid lake, protected by walls of indifference that no storm could breach. Seeing no objection from me, Chloe flew in a designer from Paris to create a custom gown. As I looked at the sketches of wedding dresses on her tablet, my mind drifted back to the beginning. We had married in a rush, just a quick trip to get the license. We were supposed to have a real ceremony, but she got a frantic call from Julian and left the country that very night, our wedding night. The ceremony never happened. Now she wanted to finally have that wedding, but I couldn't feel a shred of happiness. I was already on my way out. Everything she did now was far too late. 3 days before the ceremony, the Sterling estate was buzzing with activity. The staff was so busy that no one noticed a shadowy figure slip into the room where the formal wear was being kept. When Julian arrived, I handed him the tablet. "We're about the same build, so the tuxedo was made to my measurements," I told him. "You should try it on now. If anything needs to be adjusted, just mark it on the tablet and I'll have the designer take care of it." Julian stared at me, confused. "But it's your wedding. Why would I be trying on the tux?" I said quietly, "The day of the wedding also happens to be the day our divorce is finalized. The ceremony can't proceed without a groom, and you're the perfect replacement. After all, you're the only one she's ever wanted to marry. I hope you both get exactly what you wish for." As I spoke, my eyes held no trace of sadness or regret. It was only then that Julian finally understood. I truly didn't love Chloe anymore. 2 days before the wedding, I was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, while Chloe worked on some files from the sofa. A crisp ding from an iMessage notification broke the silence. Chloe glanced at her phone, and a message immediately caught her eye. "Your purchase is confirmed for Flight 1082 from JFK International Airport on October 1st at 9 a.m. Passenger name, Ethan Pierce." Just as she was about to pick up the phone for a closer look, I walked out of the bathroom, toweling my hair. "The wedding is in 2 days, she asked. "Why did you buy a plane ticket?" My hand froze for a second, but I quickly composed myself. "What ticket? You must have seen it wrong. It was probably just a spam text." She nodded, seemingly accepting my explanation. After the lights were out, we lay in bed back to back. One of us fell asleep quickly, while the other stared into the darkness until dawn. The day before the wedding, I took out the journal I had started writing on the very night we were married, and I began to read through it, page by page. October 1st, 2019. I married the woman I love today, but my bride left for Europe overnight, just so her first love could see what she looked like in a wedding dress. The page next to the entry was wrinkled and stiff from my dried tears. I ran my thumb over the rough page, then turned to the next entry. December 31st, 2020. This is the first time I've had someone to celebrate New Year's Eve with, but I'm not happy at all. She brought me to a place she knows is Julian's favorite spot in the city. Was she here to ring in the new year with me, or to reminisce about him? I'm sure it was the latter. October 1st, 2021. Our wedding anniversary. I'm still not happy. The restaurant she chose for dinner was the same one where she first confessed her love to Julian. August 29th, 2024. Her first love is back in the country. I know it's time for me to leave. The thick journal chronicled all my emotions over the last 5 years, a complete record of a marriage that was doomed from the very start. But that was all right. Today it was finally over. I picked up my pen and wrote one last entry on the final page. September 30th, 2024. I've decided to leave. Chloe, I'm done with you. I placed the journal and the finalized divorce papers in the nightstand drawer. Then I stood up and took one last look at the room, decorated for a celebration that would never happen, and smiled. My eyes were filled with nothing but the longing for freedom. As the clock struck midnight, I vanished into the night. On the day of the wedding, the grand hall was softly decorated with flowers and white silk. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns of light that added a warm, romantic glow to the sacred moment. Chloe stood at the end of an aisle strewn with rose petals. This was supposed to be just a makeup ceremony, a formality, but as she stood there at the altar, she realized she was actually feeling a sense of anticipation. She had never seen me in a tuxedo before. The thought of walking down the aisle toward me, her face flushed, made her heart beat a little faster. As the music began, the bride, her face obscured by a delicate veil, lifted the hem of her gown and walked toward the man waiting for her. The officiant's solemn voice rang out. "Ethan Pierce, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" The groom nodded happily. "I do." The officiant's voice came again. "Chloe Sterling, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" She nodded. Amid a swell of applause, the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. A smile touched the corners of Chloe's eyes, but when the man lifted her veil to kiss her, she saw his face, and her pupils contracted in shock. "Julian," she gasped. She stared at him in disbelief, and as the reality of the situation sank in, the smile vanished from her face, replaced by a mask of cold fury. She grabbed Julian's arm. Thankfully, he had his back to the guests, so only those in the very front row could have possibly seen his face. She quickly composed herself, gripping his arm tightly to keep him from turning toward the audience. Since Julian and I had a similar build, very few people seemed to notice that the groom had been swapped out. Chloe turned to the guests with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm suddenly not feeling well and need to rest for a moment." The crowd gave knowing smiles and murmurs of understanding, their teasing dying down. Only a handful of people who knew the real story began to whisper amongst themselves. The reception began shortly after. The bride and groom were expected to change and then come down to greet the guests, but Mr. and Mrs. Sterling waited and waited, and the couple never appeared. At first, Mrs. Sterling assumed they were just enjoying a private moment and decided to give them more time, but as the reception drew to a close, there was still no sign of them. She turned to a nearby staff member. "Go upstairs and tell Mr. Pierce and my daughter to come down." The staffer nodded, went upstairs, and knocked on the door of the bridal suite. "Sir, ma'am, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling ask that you please come down to the reception as soon as you're ready." After a long silence, Chloe's voice came from inside. "We know. You can go now." Once the staff member had left, Chloe turned to Julian, her brow furrowed. "Why are you here?" His eyes were gleaming with excitement. "Why shouldn't it be me? Were you really going to go through with this wedding to Ethan? If it weren't for what happened back then, I would be the one marrying you today. I'm just taking back what's rightfully mine." His choked sobs filled the air, and looking at the heartbroken man before her, she massaged her temples. "Julian, now is not the time for this. You have to understand, this wedding is a major public event, the first time I've officially announced my marriage. My name and Ethan's have been all over the news for weeks. The entire city knows he's the groom. If word gets out that we suddenly switched grooms, the fallout would be catastrophic. I'm trying to protect you." But Julian wasn't listening. To him, her refusal to announce him as the new groom was proof that she didn't really love him. "Chloe, if you really love me, you'll go down there right now and tell everyone the truth," he yelled. "Otherwise, I'm leaving." He stood to go, but she blocked the door. He smirked to himself. He knew she couldn't bear to let him go, but her next words were like a slap in the face. "You can't leave this room." Julian's expression soured. "What are you talking about? If you go out there now, someone will see you, and it will be a disaster," Chloe explained. "Julian, just stay in here until the guests have left, and then we can talk." Without another glance at him, she turned, walked out, and closed the door, leaving him standing there alone. Julian's hands slowly clenched into fists. He had always believed that becoming Chloe's husband would be simple. She was so in love with him, and I had handed him the perfect opportunity. He had finally stood at the altar with her, replacing me. All she had to do was acknowledge him in front of everyone, and the world would know that he was her one true love. But reality had dealt him a crushing blow. The moment she saw his face, she had pulled him aside, and before he could even process what was happening, she had hustled him upstairs and forbidden him from causing a scene. Julian looked at his reflection in the mirror. The handsome face he had always been so proud of was starting to show its age. After a messy divorce, the kind of wealthy women he pursued no longer saw him as a viable husband. Chloe was his last chance to marry back into money, so why would he possibly do as she said? Downstairs, Mrs. Sterling saw Chloe descending the stairs alone. "Why are you by yourself?" she asked, concerned. "Where is Ethan? And why was Julian standing in for him at the altar?" Chloe masked her irritation and replied calmly, "Mom, you know he hasn't been well since the pool incident. He's still running a fever, so I told him to stay upstairs and rest. Julian happens to be about the same size, so I asked him to stand in for the ceremony. I should go greet our guests." Mrs. Sterling seemed relieved. "All right then, go on and make your rounds." She nodded, picked up a glass of wine, and started toward the tables, but a voice from behind stopped her. "Chloe!" The sudden shout caused all the guests to look up, including Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Chloe spun around to see Julian standing at the top of the staircase in his white tuxedo, his eyes fixed on her. Mrs. Sterling's face hardened. Just as she was about to signal security, Julian rushed down the stairs and threw his arms around Chloe. "Chloe, I was the one who married you today. Why won't you let me greet the guests with you? Is it because you don't love me?" With those two sentences, the guests immediately understood what was happening, and a wave of hushed whispers spread through the room. Chloe could no longer maintain her composure. She grabbed his wrist and hissed, "Julian, this is not the time to be throwing a tantrum." Julian ignored her, his voice growing louder for the benefit of the crowd. "I know you don't love Ethan Pierce. Why else would you drop everything and fly across the world for me? Time and time again. You helped me with my divorce. You picked me up from the airport. You let me live in your house. You wouldn't do all that if you didn't love me." He tugged at the lapels of his tuxedo. "Look, this suit was even fitted for me. You do love me, don't you?" Inwardly, Mrs. Sterling was cursing him for being an idiot, but she kept a polite smile fixed on her face. She gave a subtle nod to the family butler, who stepped forward to address the guests. "My apologies, everyone. That gentleman is not quite well and is prone to delusions. We ask for your understanding." He then gestured toward the exit. The guests, recognizing a private family drama when they saw one, began to leave, their minds buzzing with fresh gossip. The Sterlings could do nothing about the stories they would tell. The moment the last guest was out the door, Mrs. Sterling's smile vanished, and she slapped Julian hard across the face. Even though Chloe knew he was in the wrong, she couldn't bear to see the man she loved get hit. She instinctively stepped in front of him, shielding him from her mother. Julian clutched his reddening cheek, his eyes welling up as if he'd just realized his mistake. "Chloe, I know I shouldn't have done that," he whimpered. "I just love you so much. That's why I—" He trailed off, bowing his head in shame. His pitiful act worked perfectly, tugging at her heartstrings. She took his hand. "It's okay," she soothed. "I'm not blaming you." Mrs. Sterling fought the urge to roll her eyes. "I don't care what you were thinking," she said icily, "but you had absolutely no right to ruin this wedding." Julian's face went pale. "Mrs. Sterling, he began, but she cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare call me that." Just as Chloe was comforting Julian, the butler showed Mrs. Sterling something on his phone. When she saw the headline, all pretense of composure vanished. She yanked Julian out of her daughter's arms and slapped him again, even harder this time. "You bastard, Julian Vance. You took my money and promised you would leave the country and never come back. And now, not even 5 years later, you're back, seducing my daughter and pulling these disgusting stunts. Are you determined to ruin our family?" Chloe seized on her mother's words, turning to Julian in shock. "What money? What is she talking about?" Julian immediately denied it. "Chloe, I never took any money from her." Mrs. Sterling ignored him and shoved the phone in Chloe's face. "See for yourself what this monster has done." When Chloe saw the headlines, she looked up at him, her face a mask of disbelief. "Julian, what is this?" The guests at the wedding might have known what happened, but they were all part of the same elite circle and understood that such family scandals were to be kept private. But now, Sterling wedding groom swap was trending all over Twitter. Mrs. Sterling couldn't imagine anyone but Julian being responsible for leaking the story. Julian looked away, his guilt obvious. Before he'd come downstairs, he'd paid a PR firm to get the story trending on Twitter, thinking it would force the Sterlings to publicly accept him to save face. But his plan had backfired spectacularly. She closed her eyes, her thoughts a chaotic mess. The wedding with Ethan had never been about love. It was just compensation for having neglected him. The only person she had ever truly loved was Julian. She thought she could give him anything he wanted, except for the official title of her husband and a child. She never imagined he would resort to public humiliation to force her hand. She couldn't begin to imagine how far Sterling Industries stock would fall on Monday morning. She opened her eyes and looked at the man before her, and for the first time, he seemed like a complete stranger. Julian grabbed her hand frantically, his eyes wide with panic. "Chloe, please, let me explain. I didn't want to do this. I just love you so much." Mrs. Sterling nursed her stinging hand as she sat back down on the sofa. "Love?" she scoffed at Julian. "If you really loved my daughter, why did you come to me all those years ago asking for money to leave the country?" Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide as she stared at her mother. "Mom, what are you talking about?" All this time, she had believed her mother disapproved of Julian and had paid him to leave. Her resentment over it was why she so rarely visited the family estate. But now she was hearing the truth. Julian had been the one to ask for the money. The long-buried secret was suddenly out in the open. Julian stood frozen, his face ashen, unable to offer a single word of explanation. Chloe covered her face with her hands and let out a bitter, hollow laugh. She had spent years agonizing over his departure, inventing 1,000 excuses for him, when the truth was that he had sold their love for a payoff. In that instant, the pure, innocent love of her youth was shattered, and the perfect image of her first love became tarnished and ugly. Julian finally broke his silence, his voice filled with anguish. "I didn't want to, but the gap between our families was too great. I knew I would never be accepted. I couldn't bear the thought of watching you marry someone else from your world, so I took the money and left." But in the end, it was clear that Julian had only ever cared about himself, always putting his own interests first. As a young man, he had taken the money to avoid having nothing. Now, he was using Chloe's love for him to secure his future, no matter the cost. Chloe walked slowly toward him and knelt down, looking at him with a final, heartbreaking mix of decisiveness and affection. "Julian, do you have any idea? I was serious about a future with you back then. I would have given up everything, defied the entire world, to be with you." But he had given up on her long before she had ever considered giving up on him. Fear began to creep into Julian's eyes as he realized something precious was slipping away forever. "Chloe! Chloe, wait!" His desperate cries echoed through the grand house, but she walked out into the night and never looked back. To manage the PR crisis and calm the shareholders, Chloe spent the next week living at her office. She worked under dim lights, her eyes bloodshot as she stared at her computer screen, her phone ringing off the hook. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, utterly exhausted, and answered yet another call. "Mom," she said. Her mother's calm voice came through the line. "Forget about the Twitter mess and the company for now. Your father will handle it. Your priority right now is to find Ethan and bring him home. You're pregnant, and your grandfather has been asking about him constantly." The reception had ended late, and her grandfather, Mr. Sterling Sr., had retired to his room right after the ceremony, so he was completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded. He was getting on in years and couldn't handle that kind of stress, so the family was trying to keep it from him. Her mother's words finally made Chloe remember the actual groom. She opened her contacts and dialed my number, but all she heard was the endless ringing of a phone that would not be answered. She tried several more times with the same result. It was only when she tried to send an iMessage and saw it wouldn't deliver that she realized I had blocked her number. Chloe frowned and called her assistant. "Find out where my husband is right now." She couldn't understand why Ethan would leave at a time like this. What was he planning? The next day, armed with the address from her assistant, she went to find me. I wasn't surprised to see her standing at the foot of my steps. I looked up, my eyes devoid of any warmth, and asked flatly, "What are you doing here?" She wore no makeup, a stark contrast to the perfectly put-together woman I was used to seeing. For a moment, she looked like a stranger. "You've made your point," she said suddenly. "Isn't it time you came home?" Perhaps sensing how harsh that sounded, she quickly added, "Grandfather keeps asking for you, and everyone is so excited about the baby." I laughed inwardly. We were already divorced, and she still thought this was just me acting out. I didn't even look up as I stated a simple fact. "Miss Sterling, we are divorced. I am done with you." The word divorced made her laugh as if I told a joke. "Divorced? I never signed any papers. How could we possibly be divorced?" She grabbed my arm. "I don't have time for this. You're coming home with me now. Do you want our child to grow up without a father?" I remained perfectly still. "Chloe, if you don't believe me, go back to our room. You'll find the signed divorce papers in the nightstand." She froze, her brow furrowing deeply. "Ethan, I don't have time for your jokes." But my expression was dead serious. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but she tightened her grip on my arm. When would I have possibly signed divorce papers? She said coldly. And even if I had, my family would never allow it. Then, as if remembering her trump card, she looked down at her stomach, her expression softening. Besides, I'm pregnant. You can't abandon our child. This time, a smirk finally touched my lips, but my voice was ice. Our child? How can I be sure that child is even mine? I saw your medical report, Chloe. I know for a fact we weren't together when that baby was conceived. I had found the report on the night I planned to leave. The moment I knew the child wasn't mine, any last shred of hesitation vanished. Are you questioning my baby's paternity? Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. When did you see that report? The night you ran off to Julian's apartment, I said calmly. I found the lab results you'd hidden in your nightstand. Do whatever you want with the baby. It's not mine. She grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging into me. How dare you? Ethan, how dare you say that? I watched as her face turned from pale to ashen, her usually calm, detached eyes now swirling with a storm of pain, disbelief, and rage. And all I felt was a deep, satisfying release. What was her momentary pain compared to the 5 years of misery I had endured? I pried her fingers from my shoulders, one by one, and for the first time, I smiled a genuine, happy smile at her. Why wouldn't I dare? I said. A child born under such circumstances is destined for a difficult life. But you love me, she screamed, her voice raw with fury. Why can't you accept my child? He'll be born into this family. He'll call you father. I looked her straight in the eye, my expression laced with scorn. Why should I care about a child that isn't mine? Chloe, have you lost your mind? Did you really believe that no matter how you humiliated me, no matter how you trampled on my self-respect, I would never leave you? So what if you were pregnant? One phone call from Julian and you dropped everything to run to his side, in the middle of the night, without a single thought for the supposed child you were carrying. I refuse to have a child who will one day ask me why his mother is never home. I will not let another person endure the pain that I went through. You are not fit to be a mother, Chloe, and I am not fit to be that child's father. Seeing the redness in my eyes, she looked as though she was choking, a bitter taste filling her mouth, unable to speak. The hand on my shoulder fell away. I don't know how long we stood there in silence before she finally spoke. It's over between Julian and me, she whispered. I'll get rid of the baby. So, I cut her off before she could finish. You're right, it's over, and you should never come here again. I turned to close the door, but was stopped by the urgent ringing of my phone. In the end, I flew back to New York with Chloe. We went straight to the hospital from the airport. It turned out that Mrs. Sterling had found the papers in my nightstand. When she read my journal, the shock was too much for her heart, and she collapsed. Looking at Mrs. Sterling's pale face in the hospital bed, I was overcome with guilt. With the exception of Chloe, the entire Sterling family had always been incredibly kind to me, especially her mother, who often called just to see how I was doing. Mrs. Sterling, I said, my voice thick with emotion, I'm so sorry. She let out a long sigh and patted my hand reassuringly. You have nothing to apologize for, Ethan. This is all my daughter's fault. She remembered the first time she met me, a bright-eyed young man, full of energy, wearing clothes that were old but clean, blushing as he greeted her. Now, after only 5 years of marriage, my eyes were lifeless and filled with despair. She had tried to reason with Chloe countless times, but her daughter was so obsessed with Julian that she wouldn't listen. She blamed herself for being so unlucky in her daughter's choice. Back at the estate, Mr. Sterling looked at his daughter with profound disappointment. Chloe had always been his pride and joy, never causing a moment of trouble. But when it came to her marriage, she had acted like a spoiled, stubborn child. He believed she had brought this disaster upon herself. Don't visit your mother for a few days, he told Chloe sternly. The sight of you will only upset her more. Go to your room and think long and hard about what you've done. Back in our suite, Chloe paced restlessly. The situation had spiraled far beyond anything she could have anticipated. The room was exactly as I had left it. On her vanity sat the wedding ring I had taken off, the one she had never worn. She walked over and picked it up. A thin layer of dust coated the simple platinum band. She stared at the ring, lost in thought. She ran a hand through her hair in frustration, and as she looked down, her eyes fell upon the open journal on the nightstand. What could possibly be written in it that would make her normally unflappable mother faint from shock? Curiosity got the better of her. She picked up the journal, but her hand froze as she read the first entry. October 1st, 2019. I married the woman I love today, but my bride left for Europe overnight, just so her first love could see what she looked like in a wedding dress. She remembered it clearly now. It had been a mix of spite and heartbreak. She had deliberately chosen to marry me on the same day Julian was getting married, just to prove to him, and to herself, that she could be happy without him. But then she'd seen a picture of him in his tuxedo on Facebook, and the bitterness had overwhelmed her. She had to see him, so she'd left her new husband on their wedding night without so much as an explanation and flown to Paris. A wave of guilt washed over her. She ran her fingers over the tear-stained, wrinkled page, her lips pressed into a thin line. She could vividly imagine me sitting there, writing those words while tears streamed down my face. December 31st, 2020. This is the first time I've had someone to celebrate New Year's Eve with, but I'm not happy at all. She brought me to the same place where she first confessed her love to Julian. October 1st, 2021. Our wedding anniversary. I'm still not happy. The venue she chose for our celebration was the same place Julian had his wedding. August 29th, 2024. Her first love is back in the country. I know it's time for me to leave. The thick journal was a testament to 5 years of a man's life, a slow descent from hope and love into utter despair. On all those lonely nights she had abandoned me for Julian, I had sat under a single lamp, pouring all my pain onto these pages. A heavy, suffocating feeling filled the room. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, making it hard to breathe. She could almost see him, tears streaming down his face, meticulously documenting the slow death of their marriage. Outside, the sun set and the stars began to appear. Under the lamplight, her trembling hand turned to the very last page. September 30th, 2024. On the eve of our wedding, I've decided to leave. Chloe, I'm done with you. A single tear fell onto the page, smudging the ink. She touched her cheek and was surprised to find it wet. She hadn't even realized she was crying. The lights in the master suite stayed on all night. The next morning, when I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. Her face was pale, her eyes were bloodshot, and her lips were colorless. And when she looked at me, her eyes were filled with a deep, soul-crushing guilt. A member of the staff nodded a greeting to her before turning to me. "Sir, your room is this way." To keep the truth from her grandfather, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling hadn't told anyone about the divorce, so the staff still referred to me as Sir. Hearing the title gave Chloe a strange pang of warmth, a fleeting memory of a time before everything fell apart. But then the memory of the journal returned, and the light in her eyes faded. She was about to call out my name, but the door to my room closed firmly in her face. Chloe let out a short, bitter laugh. Then, silently, she made a decision, one she told no one about. She went to the hospital. The doctor asked her again and again, "Miss Sterling, are you absolutely sure? Given your health history, this carries significant risks." "I'm sure," she said, her voice unwavering. She placed a hand on her stomach, where she could feel the faint flutter of a new life. "I'm so sorry, little one," she whispered. "It's all my fault. I made the wrong choices and I trusted the wrong person. I hope you find your way to a happy family that deserves you. Please don't blame me." Over the next few weeks, the entire staff noticed a change in Chloe. The first to see it was the head housekeeper, who had been with her for years. She was used to Chloe leaving before dawn and returning late at night, often drunk. Sometimes, when she flew off to see Julian, she would be gone for months at a time. But now, the housekeeper found her at the breakfast table every single morning, and she would stay there, waiting until I came downstairs. The staff wasn't used to it, and neither was I. Since I'd been back at the Sterling estate, I saw more of Chloe than anyone else. I had no idea where she was finding the time to be home so much. Her eyes followed me everywhere, and it made my skin crawl. I had planned to leave New York for good, but Mrs. Sterling told me that her father's health was failing, and that he might not have much time left. His greatest joy was having the whole family together under one roof. She begged me to stay at the estate for a while longer, assuring me that aside from keeping up appearances for her father, I would be free to do as I pleased. She even offered to have her husband send Chloe away on business if her presence bothered me. I thought of Mr. Sterling Sr., who had been so kind to me from the very beginning, and my resolve softened. I agreed to stay a while longer. Mrs. Sterling immediately had a guest room prepared for me. Perhaps it was the finality of the divorce, but my mindset had completely shifted. I ate well, slept well, and spent my days helping Mrs. Sterling in her garden or going for walks with her. The only thing that made me uncomfortable was the way Chloe was always watching me, her eyes filled with that same look of guilt. It gave me goosebumps. I started pretending not to see her whenever we were in the same room. As a result, we hadn't exchanged a single word since my return. She didn't find an opportunity to speak to me until Mr. Sterling Sr.'s 80th birthday party. Amid the celebration, I smiled as I handed my gift to the butler and turned to the man of the hour. "Grandfather," I said warmly, "wishing you many more years of health and happiness." Mr. Sterling Sr. laughed heartily. "Good, good," he said. "It sets my mind at ease to see you and Chloe so happy together." His words warmed my heart, and I nodded. After greeting her parents, I excused myself and went upstairs to my room. I was just about to close the door when a hand shot out and stopped it. I opened the door again, and the smile instantly vanished from my face. "Chloe, what are you doing?" I demanded. She pushed her way into the room and moved as if to embrace me, but I took a sharp step back. "If you have something to say, then say it," I said, my brow furrowed. "But keep your hands to yourself." Seeing me recoil from her sent a visible pang of hurt across her face. When she just stood there, hesitating, I lost all patience. I walked back to the door and held it open. "Either say what you came to say or get out. I'm tired." Chloe finally took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "Ethan," she said, her voice earnest, "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was genuinely confused." "What are you apologizing for?" A bitter smile touched her lips. "I read your journal. I never knew how much I'd hurt you." My expression remained unchanged, as if she were talking about someone else entirely. "And?" I asked, her eyes filled with pain. "I truly had no idea how much you were suffering all those times I left you for Julian. And I took care of the pregnancy. I really want a fresh start with you, Ethan." Her regret was so profound it almost made me laugh. Hurt? In her mind, that's all I had been. A little hurt. She had no idea that beyond the hurt, there was the crushing weight of neglect, night after night. The countless sleepless nights I spent alone, only to force a smile in the morning so no one would know the truth and pity me. I had played the part for so long I had become numb, and now all she could see was that I had been hurt. For the first time, I truly looked at her, and I could see the regret and pain in her eyes were real. If she had shown this remorse on our wedding night or even earlier, when we first got our marriage license, if she had apologized then, I wouldn't have spent 5 years trapped in a loveless marriage. I wouldn't have had to perfect my fake smile or spend my nights crying as I wrote in my journal. Her apology was 5 years too late, and I refused to accept it. I cut off her explanation and pushed her out of the room. "I'm tired," I said. "I don't want to hear it." And for the second time that night, I closed the door in her face. She didn't say another word to me for the rest of the party. She just stood beside me in silence as I smiled and said goodbye to the last of the guests, then followed me back toward the guest wing of the house. As we were passing the decorative pond, disaster struck. A voice yelled, "Look out!" One of the guests had brought a live deer as an eccentric birthday gift. As the staff were trying to move it to an enclosure after the party, the animal got spooked and bolted, charging straight for us. My eyes flew open in terror, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. Suddenly, a force shoved me from behind. It was Chloe. "Ethan, watch out!" she screamed as she pushed me out of the way. With a loud splash, the deer knocked Chloe into the pond. The force of the impact sent her head crashing against a decorative rock, and blood instantly began to stain the water. The next time Chloe opened her eyes, she was in a hospital bed. "Ethan?" she murmured. A cold voice answered her. "Ethan isn't here. It's just me." "Where's Ethan?" Chloe asked frantically. "Is he okay?" She tried to sit up, but her mother quickly pushed her back down. "Don't move, you have a concussion. And don't worry about Ethan. He's fine, just a little shaken up. He's at home resting." Chloe sank back onto the pillows, wincing as she accidentally touched her wound. Her mother adjusted the pillows for her, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hurts, doesn't it? I imagine it was much worse for Ethan when he nearly drowned in the pool." The memory of my ashen face when I was pulled from the water made Mrs. Sterling's heart ache with pity and anger. She lightly smacked her daughter's arm. "You knew perfectly well that Ethan can't swim, but you left your own husband to drown while you saved that worthless snake. Are you happy now? You've driven him away for good." Her mother's words made Chloe's heart ache. For the first time, she was beginning to understand the pain I must have felt. She couldn't imagine my despair in that moment, and she clutched the blankets in her fists. For the next several days, only her mother came to visit, bringing meals and checking on her. She wanted to ask to see me, but she could never find the courage. Finally, on the day before she was discharged, she couldn't hold it in any longer and started to ask her mother about me. But Mrs. Sterling cut her off with a sharp look. "I know what you're going to ask, and the answer is no. The shock of the accident gave Ethan a high fever. He needs to rest. Besides, he's not your husband anymore. Why should he come visit you?" "But he's still my husband," Chloe started to say, but her mother tapped her sharply on the head. "What husband? Your divorce is final. He is your ex-husband. But I never agreed to it, Chloe protested. Mrs. Sterling rolled her eyes. She had looked into the matter and discovered that Julian had tricked a drunk Chloe into signing the papers. Well, maybe you shouldn't have gotten so drunk, she said unsympathetically. You brought this on yourself. The day she came home from the hospital, she saw me in the main hall. We stood there for a moment in awkward silence. I felt I should say something since she had saved me after all. Are you feeling better? I asked. She nodded and was about to reply when her uncle, Ben, pulled her over to see her grandfather. Mr. Sterling Sr. leaned on his cane and looked at her with concern. How are you feeling, my dear? Much better, grandfather, she replied, taking a seat beside him. Her uncle Ben grinned. Good, because if you're all recovered, I'm stealing your husband for a few days. Chloe turned to him. What are you planning, Uncle Ben? Her uncle came over and put an arm around my shoulders. Ethan and I have a plan. Now that you're out of the hospital, I'm taking him to Aspen for a few days of skiing and hot springs. Mrs. Sterling, who had sat down beside her, poured her a glass of water. It's good for you young people to get away. It gets boring cooped up in this old house. A wave of disappointment washed over Chloe. She had just gotten home and was hoping for a chance to reconnect with me, and now I was leaving. Perhaps sensing her disappointment, Uncle Ben added, Why don't you come with us? Her grandfather immediately protested. You just got out of the hospital. It's not a good idea. Chloe looked at me, but my face was a mask of indifference. She turned back to her grandfather. I'll be fine, Grandpa. I've been cooped up for weeks. I could use a vacation. After a bit more discussion, Uncle Ben made the final decision. It's settled then. You're coming with us. And so, the three of us set off on our trip. On the way there, Uncle Ben chattered excitedly about our plans, and while Chloe and I both chimed in occasionally, he soon picked up on the strange tension between us. He leaned between our seats, a confused look on his face. You two are acting really weird. You're a married couple, but you haven't said a word to each other. You've only talked to me. No one but her parents knew we were divorced. We both tensed up, unsure of what to say, but then Uncle Ben clapped his hands as if he'd had a revelation. Oh, I get it. Ethan, you're still mad about the wedding fiasco, aren't you? Don't worry. We'll make Chloe carry all the bags as punishment. We bantered back and forth for the rest of the drive, and soon we arrived at our hotel in Aspen. After getting our key cards from the front desk, we went to find our rooms. Uncle Ben waved cheerfully. See you guys in a bit, he said, before disappearing into his room. Chloe and I opened the door to our room and froze. Uncle Ben had booked us a suite with a single king-sized bed. I turned to leave. I'll go get another room from the front desk. Chloe quickly blocked my way. You can't. Uncle Ben can't keep a secret. If he finds out we're in separate rooms, he'll tell grandfather everything when we get back. I didn't even look at her as I tried to step around her. Ethan, she called out, stopping me. I finally met her gaze, my eyes cold and distant. So what? Everyone in the family thinks I'm angry with you over the wedding. It's perfectly reasonable that we wouldn't want to share a room. And what if grandfather finds out? This whole mess is your fault anyway. Besides, what kind of divorced couple shares a room? You might not have a problem with it, but the idea makes me sick. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words caught in her throat. I didn't give her another glance as I walked straight to the front desk and booked a separate room. A little later, when Uncle Ben came out of his room dressed for the hot springs, he saw us emerging from two different doors. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, but then his expression changed, and he didn't say a word about it. Uncle Ben had booked a private hot spring, with a wooden partition separating the men's and women's sides. I sank into the warm water with a long, contented sigh. Chloe must have felt awkward, because she chose a spot far away from us. Uncle Ben and I started chatting over the partition, and somehow the conversation turned to Chloe. On the other side, the woman who had been washing her shoulders froze when she heard her name. Ethan, Uncle Ben asked, have you thought about giving her a chance to make things right? Uncle Ben lived abroad and had only come back for the birthday party, so all he knew was that there had been a groom swap and that Chloe had lost the baby. He knew it was all Chloe's fault, but he could see I had no intention of forgiving her, and he wanted to stand up for his niece. I didn't even look up from the water. After a long pause, I gave a non-committal answer. Maybe someday. On the other side of the partition, I heard Chloe give a small, bitter laugh. Uncle Ben took the hint and dropped the subject. After the hot springs, we went to a restaurant at the base of the mountain for dinner. It was a buffet, so we all grabbed trays and started picking out our food. Chloe followed behind me, pointing out different dishes she thought I might like. But every time she made a suggestion, I shot it down without a second glance. I'm allergic to that. I don't like seafood. No thanks. The light in her eyes dimmed with each rejection. Uncle Ben, who had been watching us, couldn't take it anymore. As I walked away to find a table, he rapped her sharply on the head. "What is wrong with you, Chloe?" he hissed. "Don't tell me you've been married for 5 years, and you don't even know what the man can and can't eat." A sad, helpless smile touched Chloe's lips, her eyes filled with a deep, lonely pain. How could she know what I liked? For 5 years, I had been the one catering to her tastes. Every meal we ever had, whether at home or in a restaurant, was chosen based on her preferences. All of her attention, all of her care, had been reserved for Julian. She could list every single one of his favorite foods and allergies from memory, but she couldn't name one of mine. She barely touched her food. After dinner, we had planned to go night skiing, but the slopes were closed due to the weather. We ended up back at the hotel, where Uncle Ben suggested we go to the bar, but he was called away on business before we could even order. Suddenly, we were alone at the table in the dimly lit bar. I decided to drop the act. I shrugged off my jacket and started toward the dance floor. It was only then that she noticed I had unbuttoned my shirt, revealing a glimpse of my abs. I've always been told I'm handsome, and my unbuttoned shirt was apparently enough to draw more than a few stares. The attention I was getting clearly bothered her, as if her private property was being ogled by strangers. She strode over to me and tried to drape her own coat over my shoulders, but I sidestepped her. "Chloe, we're divorced," I said coolly. "You don't have the right to tell me what to do." I tried to pull my arm away, but she held on tight. "How can you walk around dressed like that?" she demanded. In her mind, I was the man who always wore perfectly tailored suits, my shirts buttoned up to the collar. She had forgotten that before I married her, I was my own person with my own style, and now that we were divorced, she had absolutely no say in how I dressed. I glared at her, my patience wearing thin. "Let go of me, Chloe. You have no right to tell me what to do." Her eyes were red with frustration as she tried to drag me toward the exit. I slapped her hand away from my arm. She touched her cheek where I'd hit her, her eyes flashing with pain. "If someone takes a picture of you dressed like this," she said, her voice choked, "think of the scandal it would cause for the Sterling family. What if grandfather saw it?" I finally wrenched my arm free. "Enough," I sneered. "If you don't like it, just say so. Don't try to use your family's reputation or your grandfather to control me." "It's pathetic, Chloe. Do you really think I care? We can just announce the divorce if it bothers you so much." The cold indifference in my eyes seemed to physically wound her, and a wave of pain washed over her face. It was true. We were divorced. If I had cared about any of that, I never would have left her in the first place. And the truth was, her family didn't care about that kind of gossip either. "You seem to have forgotten that from the day I married you, your family told me I was free to be myself, that they didn't care about appearances. I only changed my style because of you. Well, I'm a free man now. What makes you think I would ever go back to being the person you wanted me to be?" Without another glance at her, I walked onto the dance floor. A bitter taste filled her mouth. She knew she no longer had any right to control me. We didn't speak for the rest of the evening. At dinner, Uncle Ben shoveled a piece of cod into his mouth, his eyes darting back and forth between us. After swallowing, he asked, a confused look on his face, "Did you two have another fight while I was gone? Chloe, did you do something to upset Ethan?" Neither of us answered. Uncle Ben sighed dramatically. "Married people." Just as he was about to press the issue, I poured him a glass of juice. "It's nothing, Uncle Ben. Let's just drop it." He took the hint and let it go. But later that night, as I was closing my door, I heard him smack Chloe lightly on the back of the head. "What did you do to him?" he demanded. "I haven't seen him genuinely smile once on this entire trip. I shouldn't have let you come. Tell me what's going on. And I don't just mean tonight." He had a feeling our problems ran deeper than just the wedding and the miscarriage. Seeing the determined look in her uncle's eyes, Chloe finally broke down and told him everything that had happened over the last 5 years. But Uncle Ben was still skeptical. "So you got divorced because of all this?" he asked. He reasoned that if it were just about Julian, we would have at least shared the suite. There was a sofa, after all. My insistence on getting a separate room could only mean one thing. Chloe's silence was all the confirmation he needed. Uncle Ben flew into a rage, smacking her on the back repeatedly. "Are you even human?" he yelled. "You left your husband completely alone for 5 years. How is that any different from being widowed? How could you be so cruel? What kind of spell did that Julian cast on you? You deserve to be alone. I knew there was a reason you were so eager to come on this trip. You're trying to win him back? Fat chance. If I were him, I would have been gone long ago. Only someone as good-natured as Ethan would even be speaking to you." He was right. I was good-natured, That's why I had endured 5 years of misery before finally leaving. I hadn't made a scene, or leaked the story to the press, or even thrown the divorce papers in her face. I had avoided a confrontation altogether by having Julian do my dirty work for me. And it was my good nature that now left her at a complete loss. She had no idea how to win me back. My calm indifference was an impenetrable wall. She would have preferred me to scream and rage at her. Anything would be better than the cold, silent wall I had built between us. Neither of them got much sleep that night. When I opened my door the next morning, I was greeted by 2 pairs of dark-circled eyes. "What happened to you two?" I asked. Uncle Ben just waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing. I made her watch a scary movie with me." I didn't press the issue. I just grabbed my ski gear and headed for the shuttle to the slopes. The endless expanse of snow glittered in the bright sunlight. Dressed in a white ski suit and black goggles, I pushed off from the top of the run, did a clean flip off a jump, and landed smoothly. Uncle Ben, who had been watching from the side, skied over, amazed. "Ethan, I had no idea you were such a good skier." I just smiled. "I've had some practice." I didn't tell him that I had spent an entire winter learning to ski, falling and getting back up again and again, just because the housekeeper had told me it was Chloe's favorite hobby. I had finally convinced her to come skiing with me, and I was about to show her what I'd learned when a call from Julian had sent her rushing off the mountain, leaving me alone on the slopes. I hadn't been skiing since that day. Holding the poles again felt a little strange, and I had forgotten most of what my instructor had taught me about safety. That's why I didn't hear the faint cracking sound coming from high up on the mountain. The silence was broken by a sharp crack. High above us, a fissure appeared in the snowpack. Then, with a deep rumble, a massive slab of snow broke free and began to slide, a white dragon roaring down the mountainside, consuming everything in its path. It was an avalanche. Shouts of warning echoed across the slope as skiers scrambled for cover. But I had never seen an avalanche before, and I froze, watching in horror as a towering wall of white rushed toward me. Suddenly, a dark figure tackled me, knocking me to the ground. "Ethan, lean forward." Chloe's voice, steady but trembling with fear, yelled in my ear. "Cover your mouth and nose." I immediately did as she said. The roaring faded, and the world went silent. Chloe struggled to push herself up, quickly releasing the bindings on our skis and boards. We knew we had to get out before the snow hardened around us. We tried to orient ourselves to figure out which way was up, and then we started digging. But the snow was too deep. We dug for what felt like hours, but we never saw a glimmer of light. The temperature was dropping rapidly. We had no choice but to stop, to huddle together for warmth and conserve our energy while we waited for rescue. To keep me from falling asleep, she started talking, telling me stories from our past. In another time, I might have been touched, but now, my heart was as cold and frozen as the snow that surrounded us. When I didn't respond, she gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Well," she said, trying to joke, "I guess you could say we've been through a near-death experience together." I turned my face away. "Speak for yourself. I have no intention of dying." She just smiled and fell silent. Gradually, the cold began to seep into my bones. My fingers grew numb, and frost formed on my eyelashes. My movements became sluggish. Chloe's face went pale. She pulled me into a tight embrace, trying to warm me with her own body heat, while slapping my cheeks lightly. Ethan, stay with me. Please, don't fall asleep." Just as my eyes were about to close for the last time, the snow above us was torn away, and a brilliant light flooded our frozen prison. "We found them. They're over here." When I woke up again, the light overhead was so bright I had to shield my eyes. Seeing me awake, Uncle Ben excitedly called for the local doctor. The avalanche had blocked the only road out of Aspen, so we were all stranded there for the time being. Although Chloe and I had been buried, the rescue team had reached us quickly, so neither of us was seriously injured. Uncle Ben gave me a few words of advice, left a thermos of soup by the bed, and quietly closed the door. I looked out the window. The sky was overcast, and the heavy, falling snow seemed to press down on the world, mirroring the oppressive weight in my own heart. Why the gloom? I thought back to the avalanche, how she had thrown herself over me without a second thought, how she had unzipped her own jacket to hold me close, sharing her body heat to keep me from freezing. For a moment, just for a moment, I had felt a flicker of warmth in my heart. But then my mind turned to the 5 years I spent alone in that empty house. Night after night, I would lie awake, listening to the ticking clock and the lonely beat of my own heart. I could be sitting by a roaring fire, wrapped in the thickest blanket with a cup of hot tea, and still, I would feel a bone-deep chill. I glanced down at my left hand. There was still a pale, indented line on my ring finger where my wedding band used to be. The day the divorce was final, I had thrown that ring into a pond without a moment's hesitation. I had finally escaped the prison of that marriage. How could I ever go back? So it didn't matter what Chloe did for me now, or how many times she risked her life to save mine. I was never going back. As I was lost in these thoughts, there was another knock on the door. It was Chloe. She had saved my life after all, so I softened my expression. "Thank you for saving me," I said. Chloe sat down on the edge of the bed. She started to say, "Of course we're married," but caught herself, remembering we were divorced. The words died on her lips, and she said instead, "It was nothing. It was the right thing to do." She then updated me on the situation. The road out of Aspen was still blocked by the snow, but the cell towers were back up, so she had already called her family to let them know we were safe. It would take at least 3 more days to clear the road, and since I was still recovering, we had decided to stay put for a while. She wasn't finished speaking when my stomach let out a loud growl. I realized I hadn't had anything to eat or drink since I woke up. I reached for the thermos on the nightstand, but a hand got there first. Chloe opened it, poured some of the hot soup into a bowl, and lifted a spoonful to my lips. The soup was still steaming, and the rising vapor blurred her face. When I didn't move, she urged, "You just woke up. You need to eat something to get your strength back." I pointed at the spoon. "It's scalding hot. How am I supposed to eat that?" She finally realized and pulled the spoon back, blowing on it a few times before offering it to me again. The warm soup spread through my body, and my eyelids started to feel heavy. But Chloe didn't seem to notice my fatigue. She took my hand, her eyes full of hope. "Ethan," she pleaded, "after what we just went through, can you please give me a chance to make things right? A chance to win you back?" Her words snapped me out of my drowsiness. I studied her face, about to refuse, but then an idea came to me, and a slow smile spread across my face. "We'll see," I said. "I'm tired." Her eyes lit up. Okay, she said quickly, pulling the covers up to my chin. "You get some rest. I'll leave you alone." The moment the door clicked shut, I opened my eyes and let out a cynical laugh. My non-committal answer had filled Chloe with renewed energy, and she started following me around like a puppy. Uncle Ben was happy to see our relationship seemingly on the mend, but when he caught the sarcastic look I gave Chloe's back, his smile faded. He guessed my true intentions immediately, but he decided not to warn his niece. With the last of the luggage loaded into the car, the 3 of us began the journey home. Believing she was making progress, Chloe was in high spirits, a smile constantly playing on her lips. Even when I pulled my hand away from hers, it didn't seem to dampen her mood. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling were waiting for us when we arrived back at the estate. They immediately noticed Chloe hovering around me, fussing over my things, an unmistakable adoration in her eyes. Thanks to a heads up from Uncle Ben, a flicker of pity crossed their faces, but they said nothing. To celebrate our survival, they threw a small welcome home party for us. But seeing how exhausted we both were, they didn't keep us long, and we soon retired to the guest wing. Just as Chloe was about to follow me into my room, I stopped her. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked at me, confused. "I said I'd give you a chance to win me back," I reminded her. "I never said we'd be sharing a room. We're divorced, Chloe." And with that, I shut the door in her face. She remembered her mother pulling her aside earlier and whispering some advice on how to win a man back. She pursed her lips and opened her phone's browser. The first suggestion was, celebrate his birthday. Chloe checked her calendar and realized my birthday was that weekend. The memory of last year's birthday, which she had missed because she was picking Julian up from the airport, sent a fresh wave of guilt through her. She immediately made a call, arranging for a reservation at a top restaurant, a bouquet of flowers, and for the sapphire watch she'd bought at auction to be delivered there. The restaurant, on the top floor of the tallest skyscraper in New York, was filled with flowers and decorations. Chloe stared out at the glittering cityscape below, but her heart was heavy. The guest of honor still hadn't arrived. A clap of thunder rattled the windows, and rain began to stream down the glass, reflecting her lonely, blurred silhouette. She tried calling my phone again, but it just rang and rang, unanswered. It felt as if a giant hand was squeezing her heart, making it impossible to breathe. Her mind drifted back to my birthday last year. The housekeeper had told her about it later, how I had sat alone in a restaurant just like this one, watching the staff reheat my dinner over and over, bringing out fresh desserts that I never touched. It had been raining that night, too. She dropped her phone and let out a bitter, humorless laugh. So this is what it felt like to be stood up, to wait and hope, even when you know they're not coming. I hadn't meant to stand her up, but just as I was about to leave, Uncle Ben had roped me into an all-night poker game. I had tried to text her to explain, but he had snatched the phone out of my hand. "Why are you explaining anything to her?" he'd said. "Did you forget what she did to you on your birthday last year? Let her wait." The memory of that lonely night came flooding back, and I put my phone away. He was right. Why shouldn't she wait? I had waited 5 years for her. By the time Chloe got back to the guest wing, the lights in my room were already out. She didn't say a word. She just left the watch she'd bought for me outside my door and whispered to herself, "Happy birthday, Ethan." But that one setback didn't deter her. She continued to follow me around, and her constant presence was starting to wear on my nerves. I was trying to think of an excuse to get her out of the house when she collapsed from exhaustion and stress. She ended up in bed with a high fever, looking pale and weak. Her mother wanted to have the staff look after her, but Chloe, delirious with fever, threw a fit and insisted that I be the one to take care of her. Mrs. Sterling was furious. "He's not your husband anymore," she snapped, lightly smacking her daughter's arm. "He has no obligation to take care of you. If you won't take your medicine, then you can just lie there and suffer." She slammed the bowl of soup down on the nightstand and turned to leave, nearly running into me as I was coming in. "Mrs. Sterling, it's all right," I said. "I'll take care of her." She gave me a long, weary look inside. "You're too good to her, Ethan." The door closed behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed, set up the tray table, and placed the soup on it. She looked up at me with wide, pitiful eyes. "Ethan," I crossed my arms, unmoved. "You have a fever, your arms aren't broken. You can feed yourself." With a sigh, she picked up the spoon and began to eat. "Chloe," I said suddenly. She turned to look at me, her eyes meeting my cold, empty gaze. "Did you know," I continued, "that the night you ran off to Julian's, I was sick just like this? The only difference was, I didn't have anyone to take care of me. That was right after I'd found out she was pregnant, and I was actually starting to reconsider leaving. But that same night, I found the lab report and realized the dates didn't add up. And when she realized I knew the truth, she had the audacity to ask me to raise her and Julian's child as my own. The humiliation was unbearable. Even when she was trying to make amends, she still treated me like a doormat. She was willing to risk her own pregnancy to run to Julian's side. If she had just come into my room that night instead of leaving, she would have seen my face, pale with the shock of her betrayal. Her face grew even paler. "Ethan, She had no idea. She truly believed I was so blindly in love with her that I would have accepted another man's child as my own. It had never once occurred to her that my love had its limits, that I could actually walk away. "So stop being so dramatic," I finished. "I've been through far worse than this. A little fever is nothing." My words must have had an effect because after that, she started taking her medicine without complaint. Within a couple of weeks, she was back on her feet and following me around again. But our strange routine was soon interrupted by a phone call. Sensing his time was running out, Mr. Sterling Sr. announced his wish to return to his roots in Virginia. He had been stationed there during his time in the Army and had developed a deep affection for the place. He wanted to be buried there, alongside his old comrades. The family, of course, protested, but his mind was made up. In the end, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling decided to move to Virginia with him to care for him in his final days, leaving Chloe in charge of the family business. The night before they left, Mr. Sterling Sr. called us into his study one by one to say his goodbyes. Soon it was my turn. He was sitting in his favorite armchair and smiled, beckoning me over. "Ethan, my boy." For some reason, my eyes started to sting. I suddenly remembered the first time I met him. I was fresh out of college, a scholarship kid from a small town, completely out of my element and trying to make myself invisible in a corner. He was the one who had walked over, put a hand on my shoulder, and brought me into the conversation. After that, no one dared to look down on me. I sat down beside him and took his frail hand in mine. "Grandfather." He looked at me with kind eyes and patted my hand. "You've had a hard 5 years, son." At his words, I finally broke down, burying my face in his shoulder and sobbing. "I know my granddaughter can be difficult," he said softly. "I apologize for her." I shook my head, unable to speak. He sighed. "You don't have to keep up this charade just for my sake. Living under the same roof after you've already divorced." My eyes widened in shock. "Grandfather, how did you know?" He gave a little snort. "You too might be able to fool yourselves, but you can't fool an old man like me. Besides, after everything you've been through, how could you possibly still be together?" I hesitated. "But," he cut me off. "No buts. I know you've been putting on a show for me, and I appreciate it, but your happiness is more important than my peace of mind. An old man doesn't want his family to be miserable just to please him. If you're worried she won't leave you alone, I'll take her to Virginia with me." I couldn't help but smile through my tears. As I stood to leave, he pressed a thick envelope into my hand. "Be well, Ethan," he said, the same words he'd said to me the day we first met. My eyes welled up with fresh tears. The moment I opened the door, Chloe, who had been waiting outside, shot to her feet. She saw my red-rimmed eyes, and a look of concern flashed across her face. But before she could speak, her grandfather's stern voice called from inside. "Chloe, come in here." The door shut firmly behind her. As Chloe moved to sit down, her grandfather's face hardened. "Don't you dare sit. Kneel." Without a word of protest, Chloe knelt before him. He leaned forward in his chair. "I know you and Ethan are divorced." She looked up, stunned. "Grandfather, you knew? You're just as foolish as your father was when he was courting your mother," he snapped. But the issue between her parents had been a simple misunderstanding, one her father had cleared up quickly. It was nothing like the 5 years of deliberate cruelty she had put me through. "If you didn't love him, why didn't you just say so from the start?" he demanded. "Why did you have to drive him away before you realized your mistake? And now you think you can just win him back? You must be dreaming." A terrible premonition seized Chloe's heart, and it began to pound in her chest, as if something precious was about to be ripped away. "You wasted 5 years of that boy's life. You left him completely alone. And now, just because you've suffered a minor injury and a little bit of heartache, you think you deserve to have him back? Ethan is a good man. He deserves better than you." She began to panic. "No, grandfather, that's not it," she stammered. "I know I was wrong, and I'm trying to make it right. I really do love him." For the first time, he used her full name, his voice grave. "Chloe Sterling, it is too late. I have already made my decision, and I have discussed it with your parents. We are formally adopting Ethan as our son and my grandson." The words struck her like a bolt of lightning, and her mind went completely blank. "From now on," her grandfather declared, "Ethan is your brother." Mr. Sterling Sr. was a man of his word. Soon, news of my divorce from Chloe spread all over New York. Just as the gossip columnists were sharpening their knives, another, even bigger story broke. The Sterling family was formally adopting me. Mrs. Sterling took my hand, her eyes filled with emotion. "I wanted to adopt you as my son the day I met you," she said. "My daughter just beat me to the punch. But it's not too late." I smiled back at her. Our easy affection was the envy of everyone who saw us. From a corner of the room, Chloe watched us, her face a mask of anguish and disbelief. Why was this happening? She had been so close to winning me back, and now, the tears started to fall. After the party, I gathered up my gifts and headed happily back to my room. As I reached for the doorknob, someone grabbed me from behind, and I stumbled into an embrace that reeked of alcohol. My gifts clattered to the floor. I opened my mouth to shout, but a hand clamped down over it. "Ethan, it's me." The door opened, and the light flicked on. I looked at Chloe and sneered. "It's late. What can I do for you, little sister?" The word sister seemed to snap something inside her. She shoved me against the wall, her eyes blazing. "Please, Ethan, don't call me that," she begged. "I'm your wife. You're my husband, not my brother." I slapped her. "You're drunk, and you're talking nonsense. I am your brother." I pushed her away and tried to shove her out the door, but in the next second, her lips were on mine. Mrs. Sterling, who had come to bring me a glass of milk, opened the door at that exact moment. The sight made her gasp. She rushed forward, pulled Chloe away from me, and slapped her hard across the face. "Have you lost your mind?" she shrieked. I took the opportunity to duck behind Mrs. Sterling, wiping my mouth in disgust. The gesture seemed to wound Chloe more than the slap. "I'm not crazy," she screamed. "He was supposed to be my husband again. Why did you have to make him my brother?" She was completely unhinged, all of her usual composure gone. "I was so close," she wailed. "I just needed a little more time, and we could have been together again. Why would you do this to me?" She sank to her knees, pounding her fists on the floor in a fit of rage. Her mother stared at her coldly, but before she could speak, I cut in. "Chloe, I never had any intention of getting back together with you." Chloe let out a strangled sob. "But you said you'd give me a chance. I love you." "That chance was a lie," I said coldly. "Giving you hope only to snatch it away. That's the only thing you ever taught me." I gave a small, cruel smile. "I waited for you for 5 years, Chloe. Every time you promised you'd be there, you left me for Julian. I was just returning the favor. And as for your love, in 5 years of marriage, you never once told me you loved me. Only after we were divorced did you start saying it. Don't you think that's pathetic? When I gave you my heart, you threw it away. Now that I've given up, you want it back." Chloe's face went deathly pale. "You don't love me," I continued. "You just love the chase. The one you can't have is always the one you want most. It's the oldest story in the book." She shook her head frantically. No, Ethan, it's you I love. I've had a lot of time to think since you left. I know it for sure now. I met her desperate gaze with a cold, steady one of my own. But I don't love you anymore. I will never marry you again. I will never love you again. We are brother and sister now. And I'm not joking, and I'm not angry. It's just a fact. Chloe stumbled back a step, the color draining from her face. Please, don't ever bother me like this again, I said. I'm your brother, and you're my sister. That's all we will ever be. And with that, I turned and walked away. Mrs. Sterling looked at her weeping daughter and sighed. You had your chance to cherish him, and you threw it away. What good are your tears now? When Mr. Sterling Sr. heard what Chloe had done, he was livid. He decided that her parents would stay in New York, and Chloe would go with him to Virginia. When she tried to protest, her father gave her a tongue lashing she would never forget. His final words to her were, "Have some dignity." The day her grandfather left for Virginia was bright and clear, a perfect reflection of my mood. We all went to the airport to see him off. I saw Chloe standing off to the side, a small bruise on her lip, and with a sigh, I walked over to her. Her eyes were empty, but she managed a weak smile. Can I have a hug goodbye? I opened my arms and held her for a moment. It was the hug I should have gotten 5 years ago. She gently pushed me away, slipped something into my pocket, and then turned and walked through the security gate without looking back. I pulled out the piece of paper she'd given me. On it were 2 words, goodbye, and I knew she meant forever.